The day the alien ship fell from the sky, the colony's horizon glowed in strange colors, a mix of violet, crimson, and gold. People ran and shouted, some hiding, some staring in disbelief. The craft wasn't like anything humans had built. Sleek and silver with curves that reflected the sun like liquid metal, it had crash-landed near the cliff edge. Smoke rose from its hull, twisting into the sky like a wounded bird struggling to fly. The colony guards had tried to block everyone from approaching. But he didn't wait. His heart pulled him forward before fear could take hold. He ran across the cracked earth, dust rising around his boots. His eyes caught every detail, twisted metal, sparks dancing on the surface, strange symbols etched into the hull that seemed alive, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. He knelt near a gash in the side of the ship and ran a gloved hand along the sharp edges. It pulsed under his touch, almost as if it recognized him. The colonists whispered from behind, "Don't go near it, it's dangerous." But he didn't listen. There was something inside him that said this ship, and whoever was inside needed him. Hours passed as he examined the damage. There were holes where the armor had split, circuits that fried and cracked open like frozen rivers, and the engine core that had dimmed into silence. Every tool he had, every piece of knowledge he had about machines, felt both enough and not enough. Sparks flew from twisted wires, and he cursed softly, his heart pounding. Then, just as the sun dipped behind the horizon, a faint light glimmered inside the ship. A figure appeared, tall, elegant, and glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked at him with eyes that seemed too big, too bright to be real. They were like liquid stars, and for a moment he froze. Her gaze wasn't hostile, but it was intense, full of curiosity and something else. Something that felt like recognition. She didn't speak in words, at least not in any language he understood, but there was a presence in her that filled the air around them. He felt it deep in his chest, a pull, a warmth, a strange kind of longing he couldn't name. He spoke, though he didn't know if she could understand him. "I'm going to fix this, I promise." She tilted her head, and the faint hum of the ship seemed to respond. His hands moved instinctively, repairing wires, reconnecting circuits, replacing panels with trembling fingers. Every spark that flew, every hiss of escaping gas felt like a challenge, but also a conversation. He could feel her watching, feeling every movement, every thought he didn't even say aloud. As night fell, the colony lights dimmed in the distance, and he lost track of time. His focus narrowed entirely to the ship and the figure inside. Occasionally, she reached toward the controls with delicate fingers, unsure, hesitant. He guided her hand gently, showing her which switches to move, which circuits to avoid. Somehow, without speaking, they were communicating. Every time their hands almost touched, his heart skipped. Every glance between them carried unspoken words, promises, and fears. When the first stars appeared in the sky, the repair was only halfway done. But neither of them moved away. She hovered near him, her presence both strange and comforting. He realized then that this wasn't just a machine that had fallen from the sky. This was a being who had traveled far, faced dangers he couldn't imagine, and somehow trusted a human stranger to restore her. And in that trust, he felt something he had never felt before. A connection deeper than understanding, a bond he couldn't explain, and a courage he hadn't known he possessed. He straightened up for a moment, brushing sweat from his brow, and looked into her eyes. The world beyond the cliff, beyond the colony, seemed to vanish. It was just him, her, and the broken ship between them. And in that silence, he promised himself one thing: he would fix it. He would fix her ship. And somehow he felt certain that by doing so, he might also be saving something inside himself. A part he hadn't known was broken. The night was quiet except for the faint hum of the damaged ship. Stars twinkled above like scattered diamonds, and the air smelled faintly of burned metal and ozone. He worked steadily, hands moving with a rhythm that seemed almost natural, guided by something deeper than knowledge. Every wire he touched, every panel he adjusted, felt alive under his fingers. The alien woman watched him, her tall frame outlined by the soft light of her ship. She didn't speak in words, but he could feel her curiosity, her caution, even her trust, radiating in waves that made his chest ache with an unfamiliar warmth. He paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Almost there," he whispered, though he knew she might not understand. Her eyes shifted slightly, glowing faintly in response, as if she did understand. His heart raced. There was a strange connection between them, invisible yet undeniable, a current that passed without touch. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time. As he leaned over the engine core, a spark flew too close to her hand. He flinched, expecting a violent reaction, but she only tilted her head and stayed perfectly still, her gaze fixed on him. The intensity of her trust made his throat tighten. He realized that for the first time in his life, someone, not human, was placing their safety, their life, in his hands without hesitation, and he would not fail her. He reached out to guide her hands, showing her how to reroute the power lines, how to reconnect circuits that had been scorched. She mirrored his movements perfectly, careful, precise, yet graceful. There was an elegance to her that human eyes were not meant to fully comprehend. Her fingers brushed his now and then, not enough to be a touch, but enough to send shivers down his spine. Each accidental contact made his pulse race, and he caught himself smiling despite the danger. Time lost meaning. Minutes, hours, and perhaps even days seemed to blur. He found himself talking to her, not expecting an answer, but needing to break the silence. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you or your ship." Her glowing eyes seemed to respond with a faint shimmer, and a warmth bloomed in his chest. He realized then that communication didn't need words. This was understanding at its, a bond beyond language, built on trust, courage, and intent. At one point, a panel sparked violently, sending a small flame licking the air. He jumped in front of her, shielding her body instinctively. Her gaze softened in a way that made his stomach tighten. In that moment, he wasn't just repairing a ship. He was protecting someone precious, someone who had no one else to rely on. And he understood, with a clarity that startled him, that he would risk everything to keep her safe, no matter the cost. As the hours stretched, the ship slowly began to respond to their efforts. Lights flickered on, systems hummed faintly, and the air inside smelled less of burnt metal and more neutral, almost alive. She took a step closer, hesitant, curious. He could feel her emotions in waves, relief, cautious joy, and something softer, almost like gratitude. He wanted to reach for her hand, but paused, afraid to break the delicate connection forming between them. She stepped closer anyway, leaning slightly, as if to say, "I trust you completely." For the first time, he allowed himself to look fully at her. Every line of her face, every curve of her frame, seemed impossibly beautiful, alien yet familiar in a way that unsettled and captivated him. He realized that this was not just a repair mission. It was the start of something bigger, something that neither of them could yet name. There was no rush, no urgency, only this shared moment of connection that made the cold night air feel like warmth itself. By the time dawn approached, the first systems of her ship flickered back to life. The hum was steady now, like the heartbeat of a living being. He straightened, exhausted but exhilarated, and looked at her. She took a step closer again, and he felt a magnetic pull that made it impossible to look away. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the universe seemed to shrink to the two of them, bound together by trust, courage, and something neither fully understood but both felt completely. And in that moment he knew without a doubt, he was no longer just a human in a colony. He was someone who had reached across the stars and touched a life, and somehow that life had touched him back. The day was breaking, painting the sky with soft orange and pink streaks, but inside the ship the air was tense and electric. The repair had progressed, yet some systems resisted, refusing to cooperate. Wires snapped unexpectedly, sparks flew from damaged panels, and strange alarms echoed through the hull. He wiped sweat from his brow, feeling exhaustion claw at him, but he refused to give up. Not now. Not when she depended on him. She hovered near the controls, silent and composed, her glowing eyes fixed on his every movement. There was a calm in her presence that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the failing ship, and he drew strength from it. Occasionally, her delicate fingers hovered over switches and panels, unsure, almost afraid to touch them. He reached out gently, guiding her hands, showing her which circuits could be trusted and which could ignite in a flash of fire. Each time their fingers brushed, a shiver ran up his spine, sharp and thrilling, and he felt a warmth he had never experienced before. Suddenly, a spark flew close to her hand. He instinctively leapt forward, yelling a warning, but she only tilted her head, smiling faintly. That brief expression was enough to make his heart hammer in his chest. She wasn't afraid, at least not of him, and that trust was terrifying. He realized then that it wasn't just the ship at risk, it was her life. And he would not allow harm to come to her, not for anything. The ship groaned as he worked, metal contracting and shifting under his hands. Smoke curled from a vent near the engine core, and he coughed, his eyes stinging. She reached out instinctively, placing a hand on his shoulder, not touching, but close enough that he felt her presence like a shield. The sensation was electric. It calmed his panic, even as the danger around them escalated. Somehow, her silent reassurance made him braver, sharper, more focused. It was like having a partner, a guide, and a kindred spirit all at once. He muttered to himself, "Come on, just a little more," and rewired the final connection. A surge of energy ran through the ship, causing the lights to flicker violently, then stabilize. He stepped back, breathing heavily, and saw her lean forward, her eyes softening in relief. He felt a wave of pride, not for himself, but for the bond they had forged. They were working together, human and alien, in a way that transcended words, cultures, or species. For a moment, the danger seemed to fade, but then a violent shudder ran through the hull. One of the core stabilizers had failed, and a low hum warned of an impending overload. He grabbed her hand instinctively, pulling her back as sparks erupted from the panel. The heat singed their faces, and smoke filled the small space. They coughed and blinked through the haze, hearts pounding in unison. "I've got this," he said, voice steady even as adrenaline surged. She gave a faint nod, her eyes wide but trusting. They leaned together, moving as one, rerouting power lines, twisting circuits, and holding each other steady. Every touch, every shared glance deepened the connection they had begun to feel days ago. He realized he was not just fixing her ship, he was protecting her, and in doing so, discovering a part of himself he never knew existed. The final stabilizer clicked into place, and the hum of the ship shifted into a steady, rhythmic pulse. Lights glowed softly, vents whispered relief, and the air smelled neutral again. He straightened, exhausted but exhilarated, and saw her floating near the control panel. Her glowing form flickered faintly, almost like a sigh of relief, and she tilted her head, giving him what felt like the first real smile she had shared with him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. They had survived the sparks, the heat, and the fear together. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. A bond forged in danger, trust, and mutual respect. He realized with a quiet awe that this was more than repairing a ship. This was the beginning of something neither of them could yet name, something that would change both of their lives forever. He finally spoke, almost as if testing the words, "You trust me." She blinked, and her gaze softened further, glowing brighter in the morning light. He didn't need an answer, he could feel it. For the first time, he knew that he wasn't just a human fixing a foreign machine. He was a partner, a protector, and someone who had earned the trust of a being from the stars. And that knowledge filled him with a courage and hope he had never felt before. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the ship hummed with life. Panels glowed softly, engines thrummed steadily, and the air inside smelled faintly metallic, yet alive. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow, and finally had a chance to see her fully. She floated near the controls, tall, radiant, and glowing softly, her every movement elegant and precise. The way she looked at him made his chest tighten. It was more than gratitude in her eyes. It was something deep, almost timeless, that he could feel in his bones. He couldn't stop staring. Every line of her face, every curve of her body seemed sculpted by stars. Yet there was a vulnerability too, a quiet strength that made his heart ache. He realized that all this, the danger, the sparks, the fear, had led to this moment. She wasn't just a being from another world. She was someone who had trusted him completely, someone who had let him save her when no one else could. And that trust felt heavier and more precious than anything he had ever known. She drifted closer, her glowing eyes locking with his. He felt a magnetic pull, a force stronger than gravity, drawing him forward. His hands itched to reach for her, but he hesitated. This was not a moment to act recklessly. It was a moment to understand, to connect. She tilted her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, and he knew she was inviting him closer, not demanding it, but offering it. A gift of trust he had earned with every spark, every careful adjustment, every breath spent saving her ship. He stepped forward slowly, and she mirrored him, reducing the space between them to just a heartbeat. The air felt thick with anticipation, and he could feel the rhythm of her presence pulsing against his own. When his hand finally hovered near her face, she leaned slightly toward him, closing the final distance. His breath caught in his throat as her lips met his. The kiss was brief, but it held centuries of unspoken emotion. Gratitude, trust, curiosity, and something deeper, more intimate, all passed between them in that single touch. He felt a warmth flood through him, a trembling mix of awe and fear, and he realized how much he had wanted this moment without even knowing it. Her lips were soft, yet firm, gentle yet commanding in a way that made him feel both vulnerable and invincible at the same time. When they pulled apart just slightly, she hovered close, her eyes searching his as if asking silently, "Did you feel it too?" He nodded, words failing him. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside the ship seemed to vanish. There was no colony, no sun, no sky, just the hum of the ship and the connection between them. His chest still raced, his hands still trembled, yet he had never felt so certain of anything in his life. "You saved me," she said finally, her voice soft, melodic, almost musical. He nodded again, swallowing hard. "And you trusted me," he replied simply. She tilted her head, and the faint glow of her skin intensified, almost as if she were smiling. It was not just thanks, it was acknowledgement of something more profound, something neither of them could name yet, but both could feel. For the first time, he realized that their bond was no longer about a ship or survival. It was about connection, about trust that transcended species, about two beings recognizing something extraordinary in each other. He felt a courage welling up inside him, a desire to protect her not because it was duty, but because it mattered to him personally, deeply. She floated back a step, but her eyes remained locked on his. Her gaze said what words could not: "You matter to me." And in that silent communication, he understood that the story they had begun together was only just starting. That kiss, brief though it had been, had opened a door between them, one that neither danger nor distance could easily close. The ship hummed steadily now, fully alive, but he barely noticed. He only noticed her, the warmth of her presence, and the pulse of possibility that had begun between them. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this was no ordinary human-alien encounter. This was the beginning of something rare, something unforgettable, a connection that would change both of their lives forever. The hum of the ship filled the clearing, steady and alive, as he watched her prepare for departure. Panels flickered softly, engines thrummed in a rhythmic pulse, and the air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with something sweet he couldn't name. She moved with elegance, checking controls with precise movements, every motion deliberate. He noticed small details, how the light caught her hair, the graceful way her fingers hovered over the panels, the faint glow of her skin reflecting off the metal surfaces. His heart tightened. He wanted to reach for her, to say more than words could capture, but he hesitated. She was leaving, and he could do nothing to stop it. The colony had gathered at a distance, their faces a mix of awe and fear, but he barely noticed them. His world had shrunk to the space between her and himself. Every instinct screamed at him to hold on, yet he knew he had to trust her as she had trusted him. She glanced at him, her eyes bright, glowing softly with emotion. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything they hadn't yet said, the gratitude, the fear, the wonder, and the connection that had grown over hours and nights spent together. He could feel her thoughts in subtle waves, a pulse of feeling he could sense more than understand. Anticipation, a twinge of sadness, and something like hope. He stepped closer, careful not to intrude, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. "Will you be okay?" he asked softly, his voice shaking slightly. She tilted her head, and a faint, musical hum echoed from her lips, a sound that seemed like a laugh, a smile, and a promise all at once. He couldn't interpret it fully, but he felt it deep in his chest, and it steadied him. He realized then that she was trying to tell him, "I'll be okay because you gave me life again." The engines roared to life, vibrating beneath their feet. The ship lifted slightly, hovering above the ground, light reflecting in every direction. He could see the stars beginning to shimmer in the morning sky, and he felt a pang of longing, a deep ache that tugged at him. The distance between them was about to widen, yet somehow, it felt like the bond they had formed was stronger than any space or time. She paused, the ship hovering just above the ground. Her glowing eyes found his, and in that moment everything else fell away, the colony, the wind, the burning colors of dawn. There was no need for words. He understood her gaze. It was trust, it was admiration, it was recognition. And most of all, it was promise. She was leaving now, but she was leaving a part of herself with him, and he felt compelled to keep it safe, to honor it with his courage and his heart. He clenched his fists, fighting back a surge of helplessness. "I'll wait for you," he said softly, almost a whisper, almost a prayer. She responded with a gentle tilt of her head, the faintest glow pulsing in her skin like an affirmation. He didn't need more than that. Somehow he knew she had understood. Somehow he knew she would return, and when she did, he would be ready. The ship began to rise higher, engines humming steadily, leaving a trail of shimmering light behind it. He watched, heart pounding, as her form became smaller against the brightening sky. Yet in that distance, he felt her presence as strongly as ever. It was not gone. It was a thread connecting him to the stars, a promise that she would come back, and that when she did, their bond would continue to grow. When she finally disappeared beyond the horizon, the clearing seemed empty and still. The hum of the ship faded, but the memory of her presence lingered, warm and alive in his chest. He stood there for a long time, eyes fixed on the spot where she had vanished, feeling both loss and hope, fear and courage entwined. He realized then that he had been changed. Not just by her ship, not just by her trust, but by the spark of connection that had ignited between them. And deep inside, he made a silent vow. He would not let this bond fade. He would wait, he would grow stronger, and he would be ready for the day she returned. The stars above seemed to shimmer as if agreeing, and he knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. Days passed, and the colony seemed unchanged, yet he felt different inside. Every sunrise reminded him of her glowing eyes. Every night of the stars reminded him of the hum of her ship. He moved among the people, talked with friends, worked on machines, yet his mind always drifted to her. He found himself looking up at the sky, imagining her among the stars, wondering where she was, what she was seeing, whether she thought of him as often as he thought of her. At first, the waiting was unbearable. He paced the workshop, checking tools and repairing minor equipment just to keep his hands busy and his mind from spinning. His heart ached with longing. Every time a shadow crossed the horizon, he imagined it was her ship returning to him. Every time the wind brushed his face, he imagined it carried her voice, soft and melodic, speaking words he could not understand, yet somehow feeling like home. He remembered the way she had trusted him, how she had leaned on him when danger threatened, and the warmth of her presence in the quiet moments of the night. It made him restless and brave at once. He realized that she had given him more than gratitude. She had given him purpose, a reason to reach beyond himself. Before her arrival, life had been ordinary, repetitive. Now every task, every small action felt charged with meaning. He was waiting for someone extraordinary, someone who had opened a door to a universe he had only dreamed of. As the days turned into weeks, he began to change. He trained himself harder, fixing machines faster, thinking smarter, planning for possibilities he could not yet imagine. He became more observant, more cautious, yet more daring. It was as if her trust had planted a seed inside him, a reminder that humans could rise to challenges even the universe itself might consider impossible. The people around him noticed it too. Some whispered that he had become different, stronger, braver, more certain. But only he knew the truth. He was waiting for her, and that hope had become his strength. At night, he would climb the hill overlooking the colony, staring at the stars. He could almost feel her presence in the soft glow of distant suns. He imagined her journey, the planets she must have seen, the dangers she had faced, and the same quiet pride swelled in his chest. He had once thought he was ordinary, a human among humans, but now he knew differently. He could reach the stars, he could meet her again, because she had shown him what trust, courage, and connection could do. Sometimes he imagined their reunion. He pictured her ship descending from the sky, shimmering in the sunlight, and himself running toward her with his arms open. He imagined the way she would smile, the way her eyes would glow, and the weight of longing that would finally be released. Those dreams gave him patience, even as the waiting seemed endless. And every time doubt crept in, what if she did not return, he reminded himself of the trust she had shown. That trust was a promise, unspoken but undeniable, and he would honor it. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, he felt a quiet peace settle over him. He had worked, he had waited, he had grown. He understood that waiting was not passive, it was preparation. Every thought, every choice, every act of courage was a way to honor her and to be ready for the moment she returned. His heart, once restless and aching, now beat with quiet strength. He knew she had given him a gift far beyond any repair, any kiss, any glance. She had given him hope. He stood there, eyes on the horizon, and whispered to the wind, "I will be ready. I will be here when you return." The stars above twinkled as if answering him, and he felt the first real certainty in weeks. She would come back, and when she did, he would not be the same human she had first met. He would be stronger, braver, ready to meet her across the stars, and to continue the story that had begun the day her ship fell from the sky. He had waited for weeks, watching the skis every day, imagining a shimmer on the horizon that never came. Yet on this evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, a faint glow appeared far above. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a reflection of his own longing. But as it grew brighter, he felt his chest tighten and his heart began to pound like never before. It was her ship. The craft descended smoothly, moving with elegance that no human vessel could match. Its silver hull gleamed in the moonlight, every curve reflecting the glow of the twin moons. He ran toward the landing clearing, his boots pounding against the earth, adrenaline surging through every vein. His breath came fast, his chest ached with anticipation, but he didn't stop. This was the moment he had waited for, dreamed of, and prepared himself to meet. When the ship touched down, she appeared. She stepped out gracefully, tall and radiant, her glowing eyes immediately finding his. Time seemed to stop. The stars above, the moonlight, even the hum of the ship, all faded into the background. It was just him and her, bound by the invisible thread of trust, courage, and longing that had grown between them. He felt an overwhelming wave of emotion, relief, joy, fear, and love all mixed together in a single heartbeat. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering, a faint smile curving her lips. He noticed every detail, the way the light touched her hair, the soft glow of her skin, the quiet confidence in her stance. In that moment, he realized that the waiting, the longing, the sleepless nights under the stars, all of it had been worth it. She had returned, and everything felt more real, more alive than he had ever imagined. He reached her first, his hands brushing hers, and she leaned into him naturally, effortlessly. Their connection, forged through danger and trust, exploded in that simple touch. Words were unnecessary. He could feel her heartbeat, a rhythm that matched his own, and the bond they shared deepened beyond anything either of them could describe. She whispered, finally in words he understood, "I promised, and I have come back." He smiled through the tightness in his throat. "I waited for you," he said, voice full of emotion, almost breaking. "I never stopped believing you." Return. She tilted her head, letting her eyes glow brighter, and for a brief moment they simply stared at each other, letting the silence speak the words their hearts couldn't yet find. Then, as if drawn together by a force stronger than gravity, she stepped closer. Their lips met again, slow and deliberate this time, full of longing, relief, and promise. It was a kiss that held the weight of weeks apart, the spark of first trust, and the certainty of future togetherness. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth and energy of her presence, and she rested her head on his shoulder, the glow from her skin illuminating the night around them. When they finally pulled back, her hand rested in his, fingers intertwined as if they had always belonged together. "I will not leave again," she said softly, voice steady, determined, full of promise. He nodded, his heart swelling with hope and courage. "And I will follow you," he replied. "Anywhere across the stars, wherever you go, I am ready." The ship hummed beneath them, alive and steady, as if acknowledging their bond. Around them, the colony had gathered at a safe distance, witnessing something extraordinary. A human who had reached across the universe and touched a being from another world, not with force or conquest, but with courage, care, and empathy. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone watching that humans were capable of remarkable things: heart, trust, and bravery that could bridge galaxies. As they stood there together, hands held, eyes locked, hearts beating in unison, the twin moons shone brightly above. He knew that life had changed forever, not just for him, but for both of them. She had come back, just as she promised, and he had kept his vow to wait and be ready. And in that simple, perfect moment under the stars and moonlight, he realized that the universe was wider, brighter, and more full of possibilities than he had ever imagined. For the first time, he felt complete, not because the ship had been repaired, not because she had returned, but because they had found each other across the distance of worlds, and nothing could ever break the bond that had begun that day she had fallen from the sky. And together, they would face whatever the stars had in store, side by side, hearts bound, ready for the adventures ahead.